celebrating 17 years of possibility. Pilot Flying J and Halloran Hilton Hill present Anything is Possible. Today's guest, Sheriff Tom Spangler.
Anything is possible. That's the truth. And what I want you to know as we share these stories of possibility is if there's something that you were called to do, or if there's something you feel inspired to do, do it. Because you'll never know what impact you'll have. My guest today, Tom Spangler, Sheriff of Knox County. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me, Heller.
Did you imagine when you were little Tommy Spangler? Did they call you Tommy?
Yes, they did.
Did you imagine being here, being Sheriff of Knox County?
I can put it in one word. No.
Tell me about growing up.
Military family. My father was military, so never stayed anywhere more than 3 years growing up. And that was tough, just getting to know your friends, and then 3 years later you have to pack up and leave. But blessed with two great parents. My mother and father were great.
Tell me about them.
My mother, who's still alive, what a lady. She took care of all of us 5 kids while my father was in the military. She was a stay-at-home mom, and Dad either would go overseas for a year, a remote tour, twice that he did that, and of course we came back here and lived for a year when my dad went to Vietnam. So we lived here back I was in the 3rd grade, and my dad passed away about 15, 16 years ago, and worked 2 jobs even in the Air Force, and when he got out, he worked here locally and worked 2 jobs then. And when he retired, his health started failing with him, and just blessed to have him when we did.
What was it like? Because I grew up in that same kind of era where our dads, number one, were quiet, right? They were stoic. They bit that bottom lip and kept going forward, but they worked. Like 2 jobs was the norm for working class folks. It was the norm. But I'll tell you what I got, and then you can tell me what you got. Seeing my father work that consistently burned itself into my psyche where work is all I know, but he gave me the added benefit. He loved working. I knew he loved to work. Is that what you saw in your dad, just that steady?
It was, and that's what, when I graduated high school, I had no intention of wanting to go into the military, and that's what I eventually did. But I didn't want to just because of being a kid and traveled so much. And I said, I didn't want to do that anymore. And then I got to just thinking back on my dad and what he did. And then one of the classmates in high school, he was wanting to go in, and there was a program called your buddy program that you could go in together. At least you know somebody during basic training. And so I let him talk me into it, but I had to talk my dad and my mother into signing papers because I was only 17, and they had to give me permission to go in. And I have to say, the night that I got there, I wanted out that quick. When you step off of that bus and people are screaming at you as a 17-year-old and first time away from home, what a shock. It was a shock. But, I kept my dad, and that was the one thing, and I can get a little emotional about it, but I was proud of my dad of what he did, and I didn't want to let him down, and I wasn't about to let him down. And the best thing that ever happened to me was my experience in the military because it made me grow up, and it gave me the responsibility of being a young man, and I'm so thankful for the military of doing that for me.
When you say you were proud of your dad and what he did, talk to me a little bit more about that.
As a 3rd grader, watching your dad taking your dad to the airport and knowing he's going to be gone for a year, he's going to Vietnam, I can remember like it was yesterday, knowing that I cried my eyes out, knowing my dad was leaving, yet him being the backbone of our family. But, you were mentioning earlier about how they're stoic, they're quiet, and my mother was the disciplinarian. You knew it. And when your dad said, wait till your mother gets back here from the store or whatever, you knew it was over with. But I was so proud of my dad as a young boy, even though he was gone a lot, but he was always there when we needed something. And I'm so thankful for that.
Do you think that informs why you decided to give your life to service in that same way? Because it was honorable. Not only did he take care of his family, but he was willing to put it on the line for the country that he loved.
He did, and I think that's kind of what got me going. When I was in the Air Force, that was my first taste into law enforcement. I was able to I didn't go into the Air Force as a security police or military police originally. I didn't get to transfer into that until 2 years later. And I was able to also join the local law enforcement police department as a reserve, getting the base commander's permission to be able to do that. And that's where my love for law enforcement started. So that was in 1978. And, man, what it's become.
Let's take a break. We'll come back. My guest is Knox County Sheriff Tom Spangler. More in just a moment.
Possibility powered by Pilot Flying J, Covenant Health, Home Federal, and the Knoxville News Sentinel. Coming up.
I fished on the pro tour as a co-angler for 5 years up until that point. And that was the guy in the back of the boat. You know, we were put back there. You do your thing. Don't you bother the pro up front, you know.
So you go to the military, you go to the Air Force, you start getting in law enforcement. Take me step by step through how you rose up through the ranks.
Wow. I started out in 1980 as a correctional officer. While I was in the military, and during my last 6 months, I was allotted, again, with permission from base commander, I attended the Florida Police Academy, which was 6 days a week back then for me because I had to do it in the evenings. I had 4 hours every evening and all day Saturday for 14 weeks. And so obviously I knew what I wanted to do. And so I came back and applied during that time for the sheriff's office and for KPD. And I got a call a week and a half after I'd gotten out of the military from the sheriff's office, and I said, here it is. And I walk in, and they say, you're going to be a correctional officer. And I said, what's that? And
Boy, we got a job for you.
I said, do I get a badge? And I got laughed at. You know, I had no idea. But very fortunate, I spent my first 11 months working in the corrections and at the jail downtown there at City County building. And the following year, I was selected to go out on patrol, and I spent the next 7.5 years working patrol, and got an opportunity under a grant to go into the narcotics unit, and that was a promotion at the time to an investigator, and then a year after it went to detective. So that's where it started. And
did you like being a detective?
I did. You know, it was a way to promote, but yet I was in narcotics for a year, and then I worked undercover auto theft for a year. So,
really?
Yeah.
I bet you saw some things there.
I have to say the biggest case that I worked was my first one, which involved Roy Clark. And I know that everybody remembers that. And my partner was KPD officer Billy Heck, and that was our first case together. So we got to deal with that with the FBI, and man, that went on for quite some time.
So what happened after you move up to detective status? What happened after that?
I was promoted to a lieutenant. I went back to patrol. Was a supervisor on patrol for a little while, and then I was asked to go into training and to start the Knox County Regional Training Academy in 1996, and that is still going on today. What an honor that was to be a part of that, and had a great unit to get that started, which means we don't have to send our people to Nashville, to Donaldson to train them, and so that meant a lot. And then was promoted to captain, was over narcotics unit again, and also over our family crisis unit then, and was asked to start our aviation unit back in 1996 along with the training unit. So those kind of combined a little bit, if you will. And then was promoted to assistant chief over the operations, which was our uniform guys. And then in 95 I was asked and appointed to be chief deputy, and I was chief deputy until I retired in December of 2009.
I notice a trend line. People ask you to start stuff, to build stuff. What is it? What is it you think they see in you that says, "Here's the guy that can start something, that can build something"?
Maybe it's where I've built that trust. You know, you can build trust, you can build your reputation But it takes quite some time to do that. And I think over those up into those 15 to 20 years, I tried to do that. I wanted to make sure that when I did leave here, that I didn't want to just leave here and say I did a job. I wanted people to know that I meant what I was going to do and that it was important to me. And I think that was a big part of it. Just letting things be important to you and let people know that you care about what you're doing, because I'm not going to do something halfway. And that's just not that comes from my dad, and I'm just not going to do that. And my parents always said, you clean your plate, you do this, you do that. And those things, they stick in your mind when you have parents that stay with you that way. And I think that was a big part of it.
I've never asked you about your family. You have children?
I do. I have 2 daughters. I have 2 granddaughters and 2 step-granddaughters, my wife, Linda, and they – what it is. My youngest granddaughter is just 4 months old now. So, and my oldest granddaughter is 12, and then I have 2 step granddaughters that are, I think they're 12, 13, and 16. So we're having a blast, and with the 4-month-old starting over again like that, it's just man, you feel your age. You feel your age.
So you're done. You're retired. You've served well. You have some legacy pieces to your career. You really do have some legacy pieces to your career. What made you turn around and get back in the boat and do it again?
As I said earlier, that love and passion just never left. When I retired, I had an opportunity to go fulfill the childhood dream, and that was to go fish professionally.
Yeah, I heard you became a pro fisherman.
Well, the pro is you can put that in quotations or whatever.
Is this bass?
Yes, yeah. I fished on the circuit that, if you will, competed with the Bassmaster Elites. It was the FLW tour, and I had that opportunity. And for a young man, a boy who always dreamed of being able to do that, and when that opportunity came about, I said, I've got to do this. I fished on the pro tour as a co-angler for 5 years up until that point, and that was the guy in the back of the boat. We were put back there. You do your thing. Don't you bother the pro up front. When that happened, I said, I've got to do this. I had my 30 years, and I said, I've had a great career, and I don't regret any of it. But I want this opportunity, and I just don't want to let it go. And so it came about, and that's why I retired. And unfortunately, it didn't last that long because my sponsors ended up selling the company, and the new owners come in and did away with non-essentials. I was a non-essential, so I went back into law enforcement because I was called by the sheriff of Blount County, James Brong, and he asked me to come over to run his training unit. And I never knew that Sheriff Brong knew of me, just to be honest, and so I went to work for him and worked for him for about 5 years before the decision came about what I was going to do.
Let's take a break. When we come back, we'll talk about running for sheriff of Knox County. This is my guest, Tom Spangler. More in a moment.
Coming up.
I was told by someone, and she'll know who it is, and she said, you told me when we first met that you're going to be the sheriff one day.
So if the sheriff thing doesn't work out, he can always go fishing. This is Tom Spangler. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Alan.
So I guess when the Bassmaster came to Knoxville, you had to be in hog heaven.
I was. I thought this here coming to hometown and being able to see that, and I attended the Sunday's weigh-in, the championship day, and to be able to see a friend of mine win that was just unreal. I know the Defoe family pretty well, obviously, and traveled with Ott on a couple of tournaments, so I couldn't have been more happy for an individual because that young man not only is a good person, he's a Christian and comes from a good family, and man, what it was to be able to see that.
What did you learn about life from fishing?
It's tougher than a job. People don't believe that. People fishing, what? You go out and practice? Yeah, we get practice days. There's certain things that you have to do. When you prepare for a tournament days, weeks beforehand, when you go to the lake, you're looking for certain areas, what's happened, what's the weather, everything else comes into play. putting everything together again and making a plan is something you have to do with fishing, with the tournament trail. And those men, and there has been a lady or two that have fished on the tour, they'll tell you that you have to commit to it. You have to commit a lot of time. And the guys who are making good money at it, that's their living. And then there's a portion of us who were in there for the fun of it, but wanted to compete. And I think that was a big part of it, the competition. Yeah, you're not competing against other anglers. You're out there competing to catch those fish. And the biggest thing you're worried about is catching that limit of 5. I just need to catch that first one to get that monkey off your back, so to speak. Please let me catch that first fish. But planning and knowing, it's kind of like NASCAR in a way. You can't do it without sponsorships. It's that you got to have them.
You're the sheriff of Knox County. They didn't see you coming. I've been around this thing for a long, long time. When did you wake up and go, I want to serve in that way?
I was told by someone, and she'll know who it is, and she said, you told me when we first met that you're going to be the sheriff one day. I don't remember saying it, but my wife told me that. And but whenever I went back to work over in Blount County, I want to say probably about 3 years into it, I had made a decision then that I wanted to explore it. I said, the Sheriff Jones is term limited. I didn't want to run against JJ. JJ and I were friends, and I just didn't think that was the right thing for me to do. And so when that time came, I said, I'm going to explore this. And I can remember the day that I named and signed up my treasurer, and I got a call, I guess that was on like a Wednesday, and I got a call Friday from Georgiana Vine saying, hey, I saw where you filed a treasurer. He said, it's awful early, isn't it? And I said, well, I need to explore to see if I'm going to be able to do this or not. And she said, why does your name sound so familiar? Well, and finally when I got to tell her, oh, yeah. And then in December of 2015, I told Sheriff Brong, I said, I'm leaving. I told him that I was going to be leaving at that time because I wanted to dedicate my time to really put my heart into this and my heart and soul. And that's what we did.
That's what your dad taught you to do.
Yeah.
Why did you want to be sheriff?
One, my heart was still there. My heart was still with Knox County. I had so many second family friends there. I wanted to give my expertise, my experience to Knox County citizens, let them know what I can do, what I want to do, and not just me, but as a team, because I can't do it alone. There's nobody that's in a CEO position that can do that themselves, and I'm not blind to that fact. I wanted to surround myself with good people who had experience within that agency to build that agency even more than what it was. When I started, I'll have to admit, we came from the dark ages. We as a sheriff's office was, treated down here.
I remember.
And to see us grow the way that we have and to see the professionalism, and I want to be that professional that leads this agency. That professional image is very important to me, and I think it's important to the people. They want to see this agency being led, and even after I'm gone, they want to see someone who is professional, and that's important not only to me, but it's important to the people out here, and I think that's what they want, and that's what they deserve.
A young person starting in law enforcement right now, watching us right now, give them one thing. Make sure you do this if you want to have a good life and be successful and really realize all of your possibility.
The one thing I would tell them, don't let this job overtake you and it takes you away from your families, because it's important that you keep your family close to you also. I've been an instructor for many, many years also, and I tell the new recruits, you're going to see the worst part of society that the average person will never, ever come across, and you can't take it home with you. You're going to deal with people who have never been or never had contact with law enforcement, and this is going to be the first time they come in contact with you. Don't make it your last appearance, or don't make it your last lasting appearance to them.
Yeah.
That impression is going to mean everything, because you may have just come from a crash that involved a child being killed, and that is it tears at your heart, and you've got to go and deal with an individual who's never come across law enforcement, and you've got to flip a switch and say, hey, I know you're having a bad day. You've been involved in a crash. This is the most important day for you.
Sounds like you got to love people.
You do. You
Yeah.
do.
Well, it has been my pleasure to have you at this table today, and I wish you much success. I love the fact that you want a professional organization to serve the people of this county. And as I'm sitting here looking at you, I'm looking at your uniform, I'm looking at the way you present yourself, I'm looking at, your vision for the officers that we come in contact with, and then the people who are back at the headquarters that staff it up, the people out at the jail. You have a vast responsibility. You're process servers. But in a community, when people feel like law enforcement is professional, very professional, which means they're serving well, it creates a layer of stability that allows people to go along and handle their lives, because we know that you're going to be there to have our back. We know that you're going to keep us safe. And when people have stability, then they can have prosperity. So thank you for being part of that puzzle, and let's go fishing sometime.
Let's do it. And let me say this. I'm not only honored, but I'm very humbled to be the Knox County Sheriff.
Well, you're a good one. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
We'll see you next time.